My gold-digging daughter-in-law called a family meeting to demand that I sell the farm. Stop being selfish. We need the money. The real shock came when she found out that the will transferred the farm to. The text message from my son Steve arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning. Mom, family meeting at our place tonight, 7 p.m. Important. No explanation, no pleasantries, just a command that left my stomach in knots. I'd learned long ago that family meetings usually meant trouble, especially when initiated by my daughter-in-law Olivia. In the 8 years since she'd married Steve, she'd mastered the art of family politics, always with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. As I pulled into their driveway that evening, I noticed all the cars already parked outside. My younger son David's sedan, my sister-in-law Nancy's SUV, even my brother Mark's truck. Whatever this meeting was about, it involved everyone. Everyone except Emma, my 19-year-old granddaughter from my late son Michael. Her absence was conspicuous. Olivia opened the door before I could knock, her perfectly manicured nails wrapped around a glass of white wine. Melissa, you're here. Finally. Her tone suggested I was late, though my watch showed exactly 7 p.m. I stepped inside, immediately feeling the tension. The living room had been arranged like a tribunal, chairs positioned in a semicircle facing the sofa where I was apparently meant to sit. Steve paced by the fireplace, looking uncomfortable in his own home. Mom, he said, moving forward to kiss my cheek. His eyes wouldn't meet mine. Thanks for coming. Before I could ask what was happening, Olivia took control, gesturing for me to sit while she remained standing. Melissa, she began, using that condescending tone she reserved for me, as if I were a child needing simple explanations. We've called this meeting because we need to discuss the farm. My farm. The 60 acres of rolling Tennessee hills that had been in my family for 3 generations. The land where I'd buried my husband James 5 years ago, beside the old oak tree, where we'd shared our first kiss as teenagers. What about it? I asked, though the sinking feeling in my chest already told me where this was headed. We think it's time you sold it, Olivia stated flatly. It's far too much for a woman your age to manage alone. And frankly, the family could use the money. I felt the air leave my lungs. The family? Or you, Olivia? Steve stepped forward then, always the mediator. Mom, please. We're concerned about you. You're 63, living alone on that big property. That I've managed just fine. For the past 5 years since your father died, I cut in. And for the 40 years before that while we built it together. Olivia's smile tightened. This isn't about your capabilities, Melissa. It's about being practical. That property is worth over $2 million sitting idle, while Steve and I are trying to expand our business. David needs help with his mortgage. There are real needs here. My brother Mark shifted uncomfortably. Liv said you've been struggling with the upkeep. Did she? I looked directly at Olivia. And when exactly did I tell you that? The room fell silent. Then David, my youngest, spoke up. Mom, no one's trying to force you. We just think... Stop saying we, I interrupted. Who exactly is we in this scenario? Because I'm noticing Emma isn't here. Or was my granddaughter not invited to this family ambush? Nancy cleared her throat. Melissa, be reasonable. Emma's in college. She doesn't need to be involved in financial discussions. Financial discussions about my property? I stood up, surprising even myself with the steadiness in my voice. Let me be absolutely clear. The farm is not for sale. Not now, not ever. Olivia stepped forward, her patience clearly wearing thin. Melissa, stop being selfish. We need that money. The family needs it. You're just one person holding on to a massive property out of... What? Sentimentality? That word, selfish, hit me like a physical blow. After everything I'd sacrificed for this family, after raising 3 sons largely alone while James worked multiple jobs to keep the farm, after nursing him through cancer, after supporting Steve through his failures and restarts. Selfish? I looked around at their faces, some uncomfortable, some determined, and suddenly saw what this was. A coordinated attack orchestrated by Olivia. "You want to talk about my farm?" I said finally, my voice deadly calm. "Fine. Let's talk about it. That land has been in my family since my grandfather cleared it with his bare hands in 1932. Your father and I paid off the last mortgage by working ourselves to the bone. And yes, I've already made arrangements for what happens to it when I'm gone." Olivia leaned forward, suddenly interested. "What arrangements?" I reached for my purse, pulling out the folded paper I'd brought just in case. Something told me I might need it tonight. "My will is already finalized. The farm transfers directly to Emma upon my death." The silence that followed was deafening. Steve's face drained of color. Olivia's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for water. "Emma?" she finally managed. "Michael's daughter. But what about Steve? What about your living children?" I stood up, suddenly feeling stronger than I had in years. "I suggest you all go home and think very carefully about what just happened here tonight. And Olivia? The next time you want to call a family meeting about my property, you might want to invite the actual heir." As I walked out the door, I heard the explosion of voices behind me. But for the first time in years, I didn't turn back. I didn't try to smooth things over. I just kept walking, straight and tall, back to my car and the road that would take me home, to the land that belonged to my past, my present, and now secured for my future. The farmhouse stood silent as I arrived home that night, just as it had for the past 60 years. The porch light cast a warm glow across the weathered boards James had replaced himself the summer before he got sick. I sat in my car for a long moment, hands still gripping the steering wheel, letting the tears come that I'd refused to shed in front of Olivia. Selfish. The word echoed in my mind like a poisoned arrow. Inside, I kicked off my shoes and made a beeline for James's old desk in the study. The mahogany surface was still meticulously organized. Bills in one corner, farm records in the center drawer, and in the bottom locked drawer, our most important documents. I pulled out the key I kept on a chain around my neck and retrieved the worn leather portfolio James had given me on our 30th anniversary. Inside were the papers documenting our struggle and triumph with this land. The original deed my grandfather had received, the mortgage papers with decades of payment records, the receipts from when we'd scraped together enough to buy the adjoining 20 acres when I was pregnant with Michael. I ran my fingers over James's handwriting on the margin of one document. Paid in full, May 12, 1998. We did it, Mel. This land is ours forever. Forever. That had been our promise. The telephone's shrill ring broke my reverie. I glanced at the caller ID, Steve. I let it go to voicemail, then David, then Steve again. I wasn't ready to hear their explanations or, worse, their continued arguments. When the phone rang a fourth time, I finally answered, expecting another family member. "Melissa, it's Emma. Are you okay? My sweet Emma, Michael's daughter. The spitting image of her father with the same gentle spirit that seemed to skip generations, missing Steve entirely. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a long day." Uncle Steve called. "Me," she said, her voice cautious. He was acting weird, asking if you'd talked to me about the farm recently. So it had begun already. The campaign to undo my decision. Did he mention the family meeting tonight? "No," she said slowly. "What happened?" I sighed, suddenly feeling every one of my 63 years. "Nothing you need to worry about right now. How are your classes?" She let me change the subject, chatting about her biology major and her part-time job at the campus garden center. Emma had always loved growing things, just like her grandfather, just like me. After we hung up, I sat on the porch, watching the stars appear over the fields where James and I had once walked hand in hand, planning our future. The same fields where Michael had learned to run, where Steve had built forts, where David had caught his first fish in the pond. The memory of Steve as a little boy, proudly holding up that tiny sunfish, collided with the image of him tonight, standing beside Olivia as she demanded I sell my home. How had we come to this? My phone buzzed with a text message. "Mom, we need to talk. Olivia didn't mean to upset you. She's just trying to help the family." I didn't respond. Sleep eluded me that night. At dawn, I did what I always did when troubled. I put on my work boots and headed out to check the fences. Physical labor had always cleared my mind. I was mending a loose post when a sleek SUV pulled up the long driveway. Olivia stepped out, looking entirely out of place in her designer jeans and silk blouse. She'd never once helped with farm work in all the years she'd been married to Steve. "Melissa," she called, picking her way carefully across the field. "I thought we could talk, woman to woman," I continued hammering. "I think you said enough last night." She reached me, standing awkwardly as if afraid the dirt might leap onto her expensive clothes. "I wanted to apologize for how things went. We should have approached it differently." "You mean you should have been more subtle about trying to take my home?" Her smile tightened. "That's not fair. We're family. We're trying to help you while also addressing some pressing needs." I set down my hammer and faced her directly. "What pressing needs, Olivia? Steve's business is doing fine. David has a good job. What's this really about?" Something flickered in her eyes. Irritation, maybe fear. "The business isn't doing as well as you think. We've had to take out loans, and there's an opportunity to expand, but we need capital. So get a business loan. That's what banks are for. We've already leveraged everything we can." She glanced away. "Besides, it doesn't make sense for you to keep this huge property when the money could help all of us." "All of us? Or just you and Steve?" Her facade cracked slightly. "Don't act like you don't have favorites. Everyone knows Emma is your precious golden child, even though she's barely family anymore." I felt a surge of anger so potent it nearly took my breath away. "Emma is my granddaughter, Michael's child. She will always be family." "And what about your living children? Don't they deserve something? Steve has stood by you for years, and this is how you repay him?" I picked up my tools, done with the conversation. "I think you should leave." "We're not finished discussing this," she insisted, following me as I walked back toward the barn. "Yes, we are. And Olivia?" I turned to face her. "I know about the gambling debts." Her face paled. "What are you talking about?" "James's cousin, Marcus, works at the Grand Casino in Tunica. He called me 3 months ago, concerned about how much money you were losing. Said you'd been there almost every weekend since Christmas." She stepped back as if I'd struck her. That's private." "Nothing's private in small towns, Olivia. Is that what this is really about? You need my farm to pay off your debts before Steve finds out?" The look on her face told me everything. Not just gambling then. Steve didn't know. This was worse than I'd thought. "You don't understand," she whispered, her confident demeanor crumbling. "If Steve finds out, then I suggest you start being honest with him instead of orchestrating family meetings to pressure me into selling my home." The distant sound of another car coming up the driveway interrupted us. We both turned to see Steve's truck approaching. "Mom," he called as he got out. "I've been calling you all night." I glanced at Olivia, whose face had quickly composed itself back into its usual controlled mask. "Your wife and I were just having a chat about family priorities," I said. "And about honesty." Steve looked confused, glancing between us. What's going on? Olivia quickly slipped her arm through his. Nothing important. I just came to smooth things over after last night. Her voice was honey-sweet again, all traces of our confrontation hidden. But your mother isn't being very receptive. Steve frowned at me. Mom, we're just trying to help. You can't keep shutting us out. In that moment, looking at my son, so intelligent in some ways, so blind in others, I realized the battle ahead would be harder than I'd thought. It wasn't just about the farm anymore. It was about saving my family from the poison that had been slowly spreading through it, weakening the roots that should have held us all together. I'm not shutting you out, Steve, I said quietly. I'm standing my ground. There's a difference. As they drove away, I looked out over the fields stretching toward the horizon. This land had weathered droughts, floods, and storms over generations. It had endured, and so would I. 2 weeks passed, and the tension that began at that family meeting spread like wildfire. Steve's visits, once regular Sunday affairs, dwindled to brief, awkward phone calls. David, always the peacemaker, tried to stay neutral, but I could hear the strain in his voice when we spoke. The grandchildren, Steve's 2 boys, hadn't been by since the confrontation. Their absence left a hollow ache in my chest. I was weeding the vegetable garden when Nancy's car pulled into the driveway. My late husband's sister had always been kind to me, if a bit too eager to please everyone. She stepped out, clutching, her purse like a shield. Thought I'd stop by, she said, forcing brightness into her voice. See how you're doing? I brushed the dirt from my knees and stood. I'm fine, Nancy. You want some tea? In the kitchen, she fidgeted with her cup, avoiding my eyes. Melissa, everyone's worried about you. Everyone? I raised an eyebrow. Or Olivia? Nancy sighed. You know how family is. We just want what's best for everyone. And selling my home is what's best for everyone? I set my cup down harder than intended, tea sloshing over the rim. Nancy, this isn't just property. This is my life. I know, but... She hesitated. Steve says you're isolating yourself, and there are concerns about, well, about your decision-making. I went cold. My decision-making? She looked uncomfortable. Olivia mentioned you've been acting erratically, making sudden changes to your will, threatening people about gambling debts. So that was Olivia's play. Paint me as unstable, vindictive. Turn the family against me by twisting the truth. Nancy, look at me. Do I seem erratic to you? Unstable? She fidgeted with her cup. No, but you believe Olivia over me. I wasn't asking a question. It's not that simple, Melissa. Steve is worried. He says you've been pulling away ever since James died. And now with this will business. I stood up, suddenly tired of the conversation. My husband died, Nancy. I grieved. That doesn't make me unstable. After she left, I called my lawyer, Martha Ellis. We'd been friends since high school, and she'd handled all our legal matters for decades. They're setting the groundwork to challenge the will, Martha said after I explained what was happening. Classic tactics. Isolate you, question your mental capacity, claim undue influence. Good thing we've documented everything meticulously. Her words should have reassured me, but they only deepened my sense of betrayal. My own family was plotting against me. That evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset, a small car I didn't recognize came up the drive. To my surprise, Emma stepped out, her long brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail. The sight of her, so like her father, brought tears to my eyes. Grandma! She rushed up the steps and wrapped me in a hug. She smelled of sunshine and that, Same coconut shampoo she'd used since she was a teenager. Emma, shouldn't you be at school? I held her at arm's length, drinking in the sight of her. Spring break. She sat beside me on the porch swing. And I needed to see you. Something in her tone made me uneasy. What's wrong? She bit her lip, a habit she'd had since childhood when troubled. Uncle Steve called me. He said you're not doing well, that you're making strange decisions about the farm. My heart sank. So they'd gone to Emma, too. Did he mention what decisions? She nodded slowly. He said you're giving the farm to me instead of him and Uncle David? Is that true? I took her hand, feeling the calluses from her work at the university. Garden center. Yes, but it's not a recent decision. I made those arrangements after your father died. She looked troubled. But why me? Not that I'm not grateful, but Uncle Steve seems to think it's unfair. Your father loved this land as much as I do. He would have inherited it, and after him, you. That was always the plan, ever since you were born. I squeezed her hand. When we lost him, that didn't change for me. A tear slipped down her cheek. I miss him so much sometimes. I know, sweetheart. Me too. We sat in silence for a moment, the porch swing creaking gently. Uncle Steve said Aunt Olivia thinks you need help. That maybe you should move into town, somewhere smaller. I stiffened. And what do you think? She looked out over the fields, golden in the setting sun. I think this is your home. And I think. She hesitated, then squared her shoulders. I think Aunt Olivia has always wanted your things. She used to tell Mom that you had family heirlooms that should go to her since she's a Holloway by marriage. This was news to me. When was this? Before Dad died. Mom never liked to talk about it, but I overheard them arguing once. Aunt Olivia wanted Grandma's silver service that you keep in the china cabinet. Pieces were falling into place. Olivia's long game. Her patience in waiting for the right moment to make her move. Grandma, are you in trouble? Emma's voice was small, worried. I put my arm around her. Not trouble exactly, just standing my ground, but it means a lot that you came. She stayed the weekend, helping me with spring planting and listening to stories about her father as a boy. On Sunday afternoon, as I watched her drive away, I felt both lighter and heavier, comforted by her presence, but more certain than ever of the battle ahead. The phone rang that evening. Steve, his voice tight with anger. You involved Emma in this. She's barely 20, Mom. She doesn't need to be dragged into family business. I didn't drag her anywhere. She came to me after you called her with lies about my mental state. His silence confirmed it. Steve, what's happening to you? To us? My voice caught. Your father would be heartbroken to see this. Don't bring Dad into this, he snapped. This is about you refusing to be reasonable. No, I said quietly. This is about Olivia's gambling debts and your unwillingness to see the truth. He hung up without another word. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked the perimeter of the house, checking locks, feeling a sense of siege. In the study, I opened James's old gun cabinet and took out the shotgun he'd taught me to use decades ago for snakes and coyotes. I checked that it was loaded, then placed it back carefully. Not for wildlife this time, for protection against a different kind of predator, the kind that came with smiles and family ties, the kind that would take everything if I showed weakness. For the first time in my life, I was truly afraid in my own home. The first hint of autumn tinged the air one morning as I collected eggs from the hen house. 3 months had passed since the family meeting, 3 months of escalating tension. Steve now called only to argue. David avoided taking sides by avoiding me altogether. Nancy and my brother Mark had fully aligned with Olivia's version of events, that I was a stubborn old woman who needed help, with decisions. I'd taken to documenting everything, keeping a journal of every interaction, recording phone calls after Martha advised me it was legal in Tennessee. The isolation was wearing on me, though I'd never admit it to anyone. I was so absorbed in my thoughts that I didn't notice the truck coming up the drive until it was nearly at the house. I tensed, recognizing Harold Jenkins's old Ford. Harold had been James's best friend since grade school, though I hadn't seen much of him since the funeral. He'd moved to Nashville years ago to practice law. "Melissa Holloway," he called, stepping out with a groan that spoke of aging joints. Still, the earliest riser in the county, I see. Despite everything, I smiled. "Harold, what brings you back to these parts?" He glanced around the farm, his eyes lingering on the well-maintained fences, the tidy barn. "Heard some disturbing news from Marcus down at the casino. Thought I should check on you." My heart sank. Marcus, James's cousin who had first tipped me off about Olivia's gambling. "You better come inside." At the kitchen table, Harold declined coffee but accepted water. He'd aged since I'd last seen him, more gray in his beard, deeper lines around his eyes. But his gaze was as sharp as ever. "Marcus says your daughter-in-law is in deep. 30, maybe 40,000 in markers." I inhaled sharply. "That much?" "He told me she was gambling, but not the amounts." Harold nodded grimly. "Been getting worse. Last weekend she was there until dawn, trying to win back what she'd lost." "Does Steve know?" "Don't think so. She's been careful. Using cash, keeping separate accounts." He studied me. "But that's not all I heard. Word is, there's talk about your competency, about having you declared incapacitated." Though I'd suspected as much, hearing it confirmed made my blood run cold. "On what grounds?" "Grief-induced instability, poor decision-making, paranoia." He counted off on his fingers. Standard playbook when someone wants control of assets. I pushed away from the table, pacing the worn linoleum floor. "I've been so stupid, Harold. I thought they'd give up, that Steve would see through her eventually." Harold's voice softened. "You're not stupid, Mel. You're just someone who expects better from family. James was the same way." The mention of my husband's name brought a fresh wave of grief. What would he do in my position? "Fight," I whispered to myself. Then, louder, "I need to fight back." Harold smiled, and for a moment I saw the young man who'd stood beside James at our wedding. "That's what I came to hear, and I'm going to help you." Over the next few hours, Harold and I developed a strategy. As a retired lawyer who specialized in elder law, he knew exactly what Olivia and Steve might try, and how to counter it. "First, we document your competency," he said, making notes in a small leather notebook. "I'll arrange for an independent evaluation with a geriatric specialist in Nashville. No local doctors who might have connections to your family." I nodded, grateful for his expertise. "Second, we secure the property legally. I know Martha drew up your will, but we should consider a trust. Makes it harder to contest." "What about Emma?" I asked. "I don't want her dragged into this ugliness." Harold considered this. "She's the rightful heir, Mel. At some point she'll need to be involved, but we can protect her." As the day progressed, I felt something I hadn't in months. Hope. A plan was forming, a way to protect what mattered most. Harold stayed for dinner, and we reminisced about James, about the good years when our children were young and life seemed simpler. As dusk fell, he reluctantly prepared to leave. "I've got a hotel in town," he said, declining my offer of the guest room. "I'll be around for a few days, making arrangements. But Mel..." His expression grew serious. "Be careful. People get desperate when money's involved." After he left, I sat on the porch in the gathering darkness, feeling both strengthened and wary. Having an ally lifted my spirits, but Harold's warnings had also frightened me. The next morning, I drove into town for supplies, something I hadn't done in weeks, preferring to avoid the gossip that inevitably swirled in small communities. But Harold's visit had emboldened me. At the hardware store, I felt the stares, heard the whispers. Old Mrs. Holloway, losing her mind. Poor Steve, having to deal with his difficult mother. I held my head high, ignoring them. As I loaded bags into my truck, a voice called my name. I turned to find Pastor Williams approaching, his kind face concerned. "Melissa, good to see you. We've missed you at church." I managed a smile. "Been busy with the farm. You know how it is." He nodded, though we both knew my absence had more to do with avoiding Olivia, who'd suddenly become very involved in church activities. Another part of her campaign, no doubt. "Olivia mentioned you've been struggling. The prayer circle has been concerned." I stiffened. "Did she? And what exactly did she say I was struggling with?" His expression grew uncomfortable. "Just grief, difficulty adjusting, making some concerning decisions. Like not selling my farm to pay for her gambling debts?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. Pastor Williams blinked in surprise. I don't know anything about that." "No, I don't suppose Olivia included that in her prayer requests." I softened my tone, seeing his genuine confusion. "Pastor, I appreciate the concern, but I'm fine. What I'm struggling with isn't grief. It's family members who want what isn't theirs to take." Back at the farm, I found a car in the driveway, an unfamiliar silver sedan with rental plates. For a moment, fear gripped me. Then the driver's door opened, and Emma stepped out. "Surprise!" she called, waving. "I got a few days off from my research project." I hugged her tightly, relief washing over me. What a wonderful surprise. Inside, as we unpacked groceries, Emma's expression grew serious. "Grandma, Uncle Steve called me again. He said you've been meeting with lawyers, that you're acting paranoid." I set down a can of beans with deliberate care. "Did he mention why I might need a lawyer?" She shook her head. "Emma, what did your dad tell you about family? About trust?" Her eyes softened at the mention of Michael. "He said trust has to be earned, not demanded. And that actions speak louder than words." I smiled, hearing James's wisdom echoed through our son, now passed to our granddaughter. "Your Uncle Steve and Aunt Olivia want the farm. They're trying to have me declared incompetent to get it." Emma's eyes widened in shock. "They can't do that." "They can try. But I'm fighting back, sweetheart, and I could use your help." As we sat at the kitchen table, the same one where James and I had shared thousands of meals, I told Emma everything about Olivia's gambling, about the family's efforts to isolate me, about Harold's plan to protect the farm and my independence. When I finished, Emma's face was pale but resolute. "What do you need me to do?" In that moment, looking at her determined expression, I saw 3 generations of Holloways. My father-in-law, who had expanded the farm, James, who had modernized it, Michael, who had loved every acre of it, and now, Emma, who would inherit not just the land but the responsibility to protect it. "Stand with me," I said simply. "That's all I need." She reached across the table and took my hand, her grip strong and sure. "Always, Grandma. Always." The appointment notice arrived on a Tuesday. Stark black letters on official letterhead. Competency evaluation. Dr. Elaine Gregory. The date was set for the following Monday at 10 a.m. Not at the hospital or a doctor's office, but at my home. I stared at the paper, hands trembling. Harold had warned me this might happen, but seeing it in print made my heart race. They didn't waste any time, I muttered to myself. I immediately called Harold, who answered on the second ring. They've scheduled a competency evaluation, I said without preamble. Next Monday. He exhaled sharply. Faster than I expected. Did you recognize the doctor's name? No, but the evaluation is happening here, at the farm. That's unusual, Haroldy said, his voice tight with concern. Typically, these are done in clinical settings. Let me make some calls. That afternoon, Harold arrived with Martha, my longtime lawyer. Their expressions told me everything I needed to know. Dr. Gregory is a gerontologist who's testified in dozens of competency cases, Martha said, spreading papers across my kitchen table. She works closely with a particular law firm that specializes in estate transfers. Let me guess, I said bitterly. The same firm Steve and Olivia hired. Harold nodded grimly. The same. This isn't a fair evaluation, Melissa. It's a setup. What can we do? Martha squeezed my hand. We've already done it. I filed a motion this morning contesting the evaluation on grounds of conflict of interest. We're demanding an independent evaluator approved by both parties. And until then? Until then, Harold said, we document everything. I've hired a private investigator to look deeper into Olivia's gambling, and I've arranged for our own doctor, a respected neuropsychologist from Vanderbilt, to conduct an evaluation before Monday. I nodded, grateful for their foresight. What about Emma? I don't want her caught in the crossfire. Emma's an adult. Martha reminded me gently. And she's the named heir. At some point, she'll need to be formally involved. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone rang. Emma's name flashed on the screen. Everything okay, Grandma? You sound stressed. I hesitated, not wanting to burden her, but remembering our promise of honesty. They're moving forward with having me declared incompetent, sweetheart. Her sharp intake of breath was audible. I'm coming this weekend. I'll bring my roommate Jen. She's pre-law and her mom's a judge. Maybe she'll have some ideas. After we hung up, I sat with Harold and Martha planning our strategy, going over documents, preparing for what felt increasingly like a legal battle rather than a family dispute. There's one more thing, Harold said hesitantly. We need to talk about Steve. My heart clenched. Despite everything, he was still my son. What about him? The investigator found something concerning. Steve has been meeting with real estate developers. They've already drawn up preliminary plans for subdividing the farm into residential lots. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Not just selling the farm, destroying it. Turning the land James and I had cherished into a suburban development. Martha must have read my expression. There's no evidence he's signed anything yet, Melissa. But the intentions are clear. That night, after they left, I walked the perimeter of the property as the sun set, trying to imagine it carved up into quarter-acre lots, cookie-cutter houses where our apple orchard stood, a swimming pool where James and I had once picnicked, under the old oak. Sleep eluded me. Around midnight, headlights swept across my bedroom wall as a vehicle pulled into my driveway. I tensed, remembering Harold's warnings about desperate people. Grabbing my robe and the baseball bat I now kept, beside my bed, I cautiously approached the front door. Through the peephole, I saw Steve standing on my porch, swaying slightly. I opened the door, bat still in hand. Mom? His voice was slurred. He'd been drinking, something he rarely did. Can I come in? I hesitated, then stepped aside. He stumbled past me into the living room, collapsing onto the sofa where he'd sat countless times as a child. Why are you here, Steve? It's after midnight. He looked up, his eyes bloodshot. They called off the evaluation. Your lawyer. Martha. She threatened to expose something, I don't know what. He ran his hands through his hair. Olivia's furious. I set the bat down but remained standing. Good. Is it true? He asked suddenly. About Olivia gambling? I studied. His face, the face of my middle child, now lined with worry and confusion. Yes, she's deep in debt, Steve. That's what this is about. Not concern for me, not family unity, money. He flinched as if I'd struck him. She says you're making it up, that you're trying to turn me against her because you've always hated her. Do you believe that? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. Steve, I've never hated Olivia. I've been disappointed by her behavior, concerned about her influence on you. But this isn't about my feelings toward her. It's about the truth. He stood suddenly, pacing the room like a caged animal. You don't understand. We need money. The business is struggling, and now with the gambling debts. So you decided to take my home? To have me declared incompetent? It wasn't like that at first, he protested weakly. We just wanted you to sell. The incompetency thing. That was when you refused. And the developers? The plans to subdivide the farm? His head snapped up, shock written across his face. How did you? I have people looking out for me too, Steve. Did you think I would just roll over and let you take everything your father and I built? He sank back onto the sofa, head in his hands. I didn't want it to be this way. Neither did I. We sat in silence for a long moment, the grandfather clock in the hall marking the seconds between us. What happens now? He finally asked. That depends on you, I said quietly. This can still end before it gets worse. Before lawyers and courts and public humiliation for everyone involved. How? Tell Olivia it's over. The farm is not for sale. Not now, not ever. And I want a full accounting of the gambling debts. All of them. By the end of the week. He looked up, startled. Why would you want that? Because despite everything, you're my son. And I don't want to see you ruined. By her mistakes. Steve's phone buzzed insistently. Olivia. He silenced it without answering. If I do this, he said slowly, what guarantees do I have that you won't use the information against her? Against us? You have my word, I replied. And unlike some promises in this family, mine still means something. He stood to leave, pausing, at the door. I need time to think. Don't take too long, I warned. My lawyers are moving forward with their investigation. Once that happens, I can't stop it. After he left, I sat alone in the darkened living room, the weight of the confrontation heavy on my shoulders. It wasn't the victory I'd hoped for, but it was something. A crack in their united front, a moment of doubt in Steve's unwavering loyalty to Olivia. In the morning, I called Harold to report the midnight visit. Be careful, Mel, he cautioned. Desperate people make desperate moves. This could be a trap to make you let your guard down. He's still my son, I said quietly. Yes. But right now, he's also your opponent. Don't forget that. The weekend brought Emma and her roommate Jen, a sharp-eyed young woman who reminded me of myself at that age. They arrived laden with legal books and printouts, eager to help. Their youthful energy and indignation on my behalf lifted my spirits for the first time in weeks. As we spread documents across the dining room table, a car pulled into the driveway, Olivia's sleek SUV. Emma tensed beside me. Showtime, she muttered. I squared my shoulders and opened the door before Olivia could knock. She stood on my porch, perfectly groomed as always, but I could see the strain around her eyes, the tightness in her smile. Melissa, she said coolly, we need to talk. Come in, I said, stepping aside to let Olivia enter. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of Emma and Jen surrounded by legal documents at the dining table. I'd prefer to speak privately, she said, her voice tight. Anything you have to say to me can be said in front of my granddaughter. Olivia's gaze hardened, but she followed me into the living room, perching on the edge of an armchair as if afraid to get comfortable. Steve told me about your conversation, she began. about your accusations. They're not accusations, Olivia. They're facts. Facts that Harold's investigator has thoroughly documented. Her composure slipped for just a moment, a flash of panic quickly masked by indignation. "You're investigating me! How dare you?" "How dare I?" I kept my voice steady, refusing to match her intensity. "You tried to have me declared incompetent. You planned to take my home, subdivide it, and sell it off to pay your gambling debts. And you ask, how dare I?" She leaned forward, voice lowered, to a hiss. "You have no idea what you're talking about. I don't have gambling debts." From the dining room, Emma called out, "We have the records, Aunt Olivia. Dates, amounts, everything." Olivia froze, then slowly straightened, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. "What do you want? Money? Is this some kind of blackmail?" "Want what I've always wanted. To be left in peace on the land that belongs to me, and for my family to stop treating me like an obstacle to be removed." "Fine," she snapped. "Keep your precious farm. Rot here alone if that's what you want. But don't expect Steve to keep coming around after how you've treated us." I smiled, feeling strangely calm in the face of her anger. "That's up to Steve. And somehow, I think he might see things differently once he knows the whole truth." Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then stood abruptly. "This isn't over, Melissa." "Yes, it is." I followed her to the door, watching as she stalked to her car. As she pulled away, Emma came to stand beside me, slipping her arm around my waist. "You okay, Grandma?" I nodded, surprised to find it was true. "I am." The next morning brought another visitor, Steve alone this time, looking haggard and uncertain. I invited him in for coffee and we sat at the kitchen table where he'd eaten breakfast as a boy. "I found the casino statements," he said without preamble. "Hidden in a box in the attic. Almost $40,000, Mom." How could I have been so blind? My heart ached for him. "We see what we want to see in the people we love, Steve." He ran a hand over his face. "Dad would be so disappointed in me." "No," I said firmly. "Your father would understand. He always believed in second chances." Steve looked up, hope flashing across his face. "Do you believe in second chances?" I considered the question carefully. "I do, but they have to be earned. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend easily. I've canceled the competency evaluation permanently," he said. "And I told those developers the farm is not for sale. Not now. Not ever." "That's a start." He hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a folded document. "I brought something else. Something I should have shown you weeks ago." I unfolded the paper. A preliminary diagnosis for Olivia. Gambling addiction and bipolar disorder. "She's been struggling for years," Steve admitted. "The gambling got worse after her father died. She refused treatment, said she could handle it herself." He looked down at his hands. "I enabled her, covered for her. And when the debts got too big, you turned to the farm," I finished for him. He nodded miserably. "She's agreed to treatment now, a 30-day program in Nashville." "I'm glad," I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I wouldn't wish such struggles on anyone. "I'm staying with David while she's gone. I don't know what happens next for us." I reached across the table and took his hand. "One day at a time, Steve. That's all any of us can do." After he left, I walked the farm with Emma, showing her the boundaries, the special places, the oak where James and I had carved our initials 60 years ago, the pond where Michael had taught her to fish, the hill with the best view of the sunset. "This will all be yours someday," I told her. "Not just the land, but the responsibility for it." "I know," she said softly. "I won't let you down, Grandma, or Grandpa, or Dad." I squeezed her hand. I know you won't. The months that followed brought healing, though not without setbacks. Olivia completed her treatment program and began attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings. Steve and I rebuilt our relationship slowly, carefully, with clear boundaries. David, seeing the tide turn, started visiting regularly again, bringing his children to help with the fall harvest. Harold stayed in touch, checking in often, becoming a dear friend in the process. Emma spent her school breaks at the farm, learning everything I could teach her about the land, about our history. 1 year to the day after that fateful family meeting, I hosted a different kind of gathering, a harvest dinner on the wide farmhouse porch. Harold was there, and Martha and Emma with her roommate Jen. David came with his wife and children. Even Nancy and Mark attended, sheepish, but welcomed. Steve arrived last, alone. Olivia had moved to Florida to be near her sister. Their marriage another casualty of the past year's events. He seemed lighter somehow, more like the son I remembered from before. As we gathered around the table laden with food grown on our land, I looked at the faces of my family. Damaged, imperfect, but healing. The setting sun bathed the fields in golden light, the same light that had fallen on this land for generations of Holloways. Before we eat, I said, rising to my feet, glass in hand, I want to propose a toast. Everyone quieted, looking up expectantly. To this land, I began, which has sustained our family through good times and bad. To those who are gone, but never forgotten. My voice caught as I thought of James, of Michael, whose legacy lives on in every acre, and to the future, which is bright as long as we remember what truly matters. To the land, they echoed, raising their glasses. Later, as stars appeared in the darkening sky, Emma found me sitting alone on the porch swing. You did it, Grandma, she said, settling beside me. You saved the farm. I smiled, thinking of all that had transpired. We saved it, together, and more importantly, we saved our family, or at least began to. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd given in? If you'd sold it? I looked out over the dark shapes of the fields, the trees silhouetted against the night sky. Sometimes. But then I remember what your grandfather always said. This land isn't just soil and trees and crops. It's our past and our future all in one place. She leaned her head on my shoulder, just as she had as a little girl. I'm going to take care of it, Grandma. I promise. I know you will, sweetheart. I've never doubted that. The next morning, I woke before dawn, as I had most days of my life. I pulled on my boots and jacket and walked out to the highest point on our property, where James and I had often come to watch the sunrise. The eastern sky lightened slowly, stars fading as bands of pink and gold stretched across the horizon. I thought of the battles fought and won over this piece of earth, of the family torn apart and slowly mending, of the future generations who would walk these fields long after I was gone. This land had seen it all: birth and death, joy and heartbreak, betrayal and redemption. It had witnessed the best and worst of the Holloway family, and still it endured, as steady and faithful as the sunrise. As the first rays broke over the distant hills, I felt James's presence beside me, as real and comforting, as if he stood there in flesh and blood. I could almost hear his voice in the morning breeze. We did it, Mel. We kept our promise. This land is ours forever. Forever, I whispered back, as the new day dawned bright and full of possibility over the land of my ancestors. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt completely at peace.